Hello again. So this is the second video on the use of finance solver for reducing balance loans. This is example C2 from our notes. So in this question, George has borrowed $200,000 from his bank at an annual interest rate of 5.8% compounding quarterly. His quarterly repayments are $4,250. So a fair bit of information given to us already, and then we've got a few questions to answer about this loan. Question A is, how much will George still owe after 10 years of repayments? So again, using our calculator, we're going to go into Finance Solver. And let's put in the information that we have. So he's borrowed $200,000. That's PV, principal value, as 200,000, and it's a positive number because that money we get from the bank. The interest rate is 5.8%. And remember that with Finance Solver, you don't have to adjust the interest rate. You just put in the annual interest rate. Okay, compounding quarterly, so compounding per year is 4. His quarterly repayments are 4,250, so there's 4 payments per year, and that payment is 4,250. But remember that money going to the bank is negative, so when he's making these repayments, that's money that's going to the bank, so we put it in as negative 4,250. And question A said, how much will he still owe after 10 years of repayments? So the number that we're trying to find is the future value, okay, because it's how much will he owe. The number of time periods, well, it's 10 years, but remember that he's making quarterly repayments, so it's 10 lots of 4 payments. Now, you can probably work out in your head that that's 40, but remember that if you were unsure, you can just type 10 times 4, and Finance Solver will calculate it as 40. So we've got all the inputs there except for one. Future value is the one we needed to work out, so we tap the button, and as if by magic, we get our answer for our future value. Now, future value can be a little bit tricky when we have to think about positives and negatives, right? So the future value here has come out as a negative, and that really is because if we were to stop this loan or pause this loan after 10 years, at that point, George still owes the bank $127,500. So that means that money he still has to pay to the bank. That's why it's a negative number. Okay, so we've got our answer for part A, and I'll just copy that down there. And it's a good idea on your notes too to copy down the entries into Finance Solver. Don't just copy the final answer because you won't remember how you got it when you're looking at your notes later. So based on that future value, we know that he owes $127,508.22 after 10 years. Okay, so he's still got a fair bit to pay off on his loan. The next question, part B, says how long will it take until the balance on George's loan is $72,257.80. So that's telling us a particular future value that we need to put in. So when we go back to Finance Solver, we don't have to clear everything because a lot of the numbers are going to stay the same. But now we're setting the future value to be 72,000, but it's negative because remember that this is money that he will still owe to the bank. So it's negative $72,257.80. And what we're trying to work out is how long that's going to take. And so this time N is the thing that we don't know that we're trying to work out. We want to work out how many payments it's going to take until he gets his loan to this point. All the other numbers are staying the same. Interest rate's staying the same. What he borrowed at the start is still the same. His payment's still the same. So we leave all the other inputs and we just tap N. And we get 59.99999. So in other words, it's going to be 60 payments to get his loan down to that value, okay? And 60 payments, because we're making quarterly payments, that would be 15 years, remember, because there's 4 quarters per year. So 60 divided by 4 would tell you that it's 15 years of payments until he gets his loan down to that number. Okay, and question C, after how many payments is the loan completely paid off? Well, similar type of question, but we just want to know how long it's going to take until the future value is 0, because when it's completely paid off, he owes $0. So we set the future value to 0 and calculate N, and we get 79.66. Now, when it says how many payments, that's going to be a whole number, right? He has to make a certain number of payments. So the answer won't be 79.66. The answer will be 80 payments, okay? The fact that it says 79.66 means that probably that last payment would be a little bit smaller, but it will still be a payment, so he still has to make 80 payments. And even if that number was like 79.2, we would still say 80 payments to pay off the loan, okay? Just that sometimes the last payment might be a little bit smaller. Okay, and on that note, often a question will actually ask us to find out what the final payment is, because in many cases the final repayment needs to be adjusted, because if you've borrowed money, you don't want to pay back too much, right? But also the bank doesn't want you to pay back not enough. So we often have to adjust the final payment to make sure that what's owing at the end is exactly $0. Finance Solver can be used here, but we kind of have to work in two steps. So the method is to work out how much is owing just before the final payment. So basically after the second last payment, how much is still owing. And then we calculate what the last payment's going to equal. So for example, if we know that it's going to take 60 payments to pay off a loan, then our first step in finding the last payment would be to actually figure out what's still owing after 59 payments and then calculate that last one. And it's important to note that in a lot of cases, the final payment might only be adjusted by a really small amount, like a few cents even. But it's usually adjusted just to make sure that it's exactly zero and no one still owes any money. Okay, let's see how this works in an example. So we're going to go back to the one that we started this video with, which was George borrowing $200,000 from his bank. Interest rate still 5.8. His quarterly repayments are still $4,250. This question, though, is asking us to work out how much his final repayment will be to make sure that it's paid off exactly. So we worked out before, and it's still in the calculator here, that he was going to need to make 80 payments, right? He needed to make 80 payments in order to pay off his loan. So what we want to check first is, okay, just before the 80th payment, so in other words, after 79 payments, and so we're putting in n equals 79 here, how much is still owing? So just before the last payment, how much does he still owe? So what we're trying to work out is what is the future value after 79 payments, all right? So we hit FV, and that comes out as negative $2,782. So that's how much is owing just before his final payment. Excuse me. Okay, so we've got that number. We know that that's the amount owing before the final payment. Now, to calculate what the final payment is, we're going to kind of almost imagine that the loan's like starting again and we've just got one more payment to go. So what we do is we set n equal to 1, okay, because there's only one more payment to go. But instead of setting it up as if the loan is $200,000, he's not paying off $200,000 anymore. What he's paying off is just this last $2,782. So we can get a little bit creative here. We delete the value in PV. We take the value from FV and we can actually just tap and drag that up to copy it to this top line, okay? What we do need to do though is change that negative to a positive, okay? Because now that we're thinking of this as a principal value, this is like this is the number, this is the amount that he's borrowed from the bank. We're thinking like he's still got this much money from the bank, right? That's his present value or his principal value. He's just got to pay it off in one more payment, but it does have to become a positive number. And of course, after this one payment, we want the future value to be 0. So we set future value to be 0, okay? The number that we don't know now is the payment amount, because this last payment won't be the same as all his other ones. It'll be different. So we delete the payment number that was in there. This is the number that we're going to get Finance Solver to calculate for us. We hit PMT. Okay. And what that shows us is that his final payment is $2,823. And the reason it's a little bit higher than what was actually owing is because of interest. Because remember that on each payment, we're actually having to pay a little bit extra because of the interest. Okay, so he was owing $2,782 before this last payment. When we account for a bit of interest, his final payment is actually $2,823. So a pretty tricky question when you've got to work out the final payment. But the idea is you would do it in two steps, okay? So we knew that he had to make 80 payments. We worked out what was owing after 79 payments. Then we flipped a few things around in Finance Solver to calculate the size of that final repayment.